from Sandy Hook, and in my neighborhood, if you go around the corner, there's a family that spent a lot of time with their kid, who no longer have a son. You go up the street, there's another family that lost a daughter. My daughter went to Sandy Hook Elementary School. Her third grade teacher was Victoria Soto. She died heroically trying to save her first grade teacher, first grade students, from somebody who should not have had access to weapons, who had access to weapons, and showed up at Sandy Hook Elementary School with an assault weapon. That weapon, in the time that I'm speaking, killed 20 children and 6 educators. So I did not come here tonight prepared to speak. I came here tonight to listen. I listened carefully to everything that I've heard tonight. But I think if we're going to have a serious dialogue on this issue, we first need to recognize that we have a problem. There's an epidemic of gun violence in our country. And we need to take reasonable measures that do not restrict Second Amendment rights, because I do believe in the Second Amendment. I'm not a gun owner myself. But the Second Amendment, according to the Heller decision, presents a Supreme Court united to say that there needs to be reasonable restrictions on the ownership and use of guns. The Second Amendment says you have the right to bear arms, and no one is questioning that. But that right's not unlimited. That right does not allow you, for example, to have a nuclear weapon or musket gas. There needs to be reasonable restrictions on gun ownership so that things that occur in schools, at Columbine, in the movie Theaters in Aurora, at my daughter's school, do not happen elsewhere. Because I can assure you what Newtown has gone through, the pain, the anguish, what the families have gone through, the families who had kids in that school are still going through, should never, ever, ever, ever happen anywhere again. And if we don't acknowledge the problem, and we don't listen to reasonable solutions, and we don't listen to law enforcement, I've had discussions with Chief Kehoe. They were outgunned at that school that day. We need to take reasonable restrictions to protect our law enforcement and protect our children.
Sure. The last two topics that I wanted us to sort of focus our thoughts on were about community initiatives and gun and school safety issues. And I know that the state legislature actually was releasing yesterday and today a series of recommendations around what it's going to take to have our schools be safer. And some other issues that others have raised about cutting funding for important initiatives in our communities that help communities make determinations about how to keep themselves safer, how to provide for safe streets, places for kids to play growing up so they can have appropriate socialization, that there are a lot of issues involved. And as you recommended, so it could be safe for your kids to run up and down the street the way I ran up and down the street and you ran up and down the street when we were kids. So kids get exercise, they learn how to play with each other, and they don't spend all their time sitting playing Call of Duty. Yeah. So these are serious issues we need to figure out as a country. They may or may not lend themselves to any federal legislation because they may be issues that local communities need to be dealing with and may be better dealt with that issue. But they are issues that we as Americans in a society which is wracked by gun violence and violence more generally, we need to figure out how to do better around this. So if we can sort of talk about these issues, and we can probably take them both somewhat together on mental health issues as well, because they're really, a lot of these are interconnected.
Let's take one first question that was submitted. And you mentioned budgets, and this person says, I endorse the task force recommendations, but they require funding at a time of very tight budgets. Would you endorse a tax on guns and ammunition to pay for these programs?
You know, I think this is something, you know, it's going to be raised. I don't think it's going to be done. I don't think it would be done at the federal level, frankly. I don't see that happening. I think some states may look at doing that. But again, this is one about input. This is one about input. If we're going to pay for better mental health, which we really just dropped the ball, folks, we did as a country. We dropped the ball on mental health in this country. And mental health doesn't provide, services don't provide it on their own. We do need We do need assistance in schools. We need help identifying kids that need extra help. We need support for families. We need to treat mental health just in the same way that if your kid has a rash or a broken arm, you take them to the doctor, you're not embarrassed about it. Families shouldn't be embarrassed about taking a kid who's having mental illness issues, or a loved one, or a spouse. And they should be able to get health care coverage for that, and we don't have that in this country, and it does make it harder to keep all of us safer. And those folks as well, because actually people with mental illness are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of violence, which is something that's really important in our conversations around mental illness in the context of gun violence, is to recognize that those with mental illness are much more likely to be victims. So I want to make sure everyone keeps that in mind too, because the last thing we need is to be stigmatizing further folks with mental illness because of this conversation.